So why are Gen Z and millennials cutting out contact with their parents more than any other generation? I think this is a really interesting topic.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about something that's been on my mind lately, and that's the disconnect between Gen Zs, millennials, and their parents. Why are younger generations not talking to their parents like they used to? So let's dive in and explore some possible reasons. So before we do so, please don't forget to like, comment, and share this video with your friends. And in addition to that, I have stitched some videos that we are all going to watch together. And I am going to see you on the other side with my 2 cents of what I really think of this situation. So watch until the end.
So why are Gen Z and millennials cutting out contact with their parents more than any other generation? I think this is a really interesting topic. And some of it is pretty obvious. It makes sense, right? We are living in a more individualized society, probably less away from the social constructs of like having some duty to relationships or to the sense of like family first or family before everything, blood is thicker than water. Those kinds of mentalities are less applicable to today's modern society. With that, we also live in a more polarized society of having, political views on sexuality, views about religion, things like that are impacting people's relationships and how they view the relationships. And I think then compounded with this focus and emphasis on mental health about creating boundaries and deciding when a relationship is no longer serving you. But is this always a benefit when it comes to potentially estranging your family? In the therapeutic space, this is something I definitely see a lot, and I'm seeing more often too. And it's not something that is a one size fits all. It's very individualized, and it's pretty complicated. It's very rare that anytime someone is completely going no contact with a family member, that it's just relief and all good. Usually there's some people that might feel some of that. There's some people that are land in the middle where they're feeling kind of torn or ambivalent. And then there's some people that might do it and it's really, really hard. There's a lot of grief with that. I think research is also bringing up the other side of this coin of like, okay, now there's all these parents that have been estranged from their children, and what does that look like? Are they willing to take accountability? Are they willing to do the work themselves? Which I typically see as like the number one reason why people don't try to work things out with their parents is there's a lack of accountability or a lack of trying to take some ownership or onus in some of the behaviors that have been harmful, whether that's emotional abuse or whether it's even their political beliefs or things like that that have drawn the relationship or strained the relationship to a level that it's no longer tenable for our clients. So is this a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. I think it's really complicated, and I think it has consequences on both sides. And there's some aspects of it that are problematic in the sense of if people are quick to draw the line that someone's a toxic person or this is a toxic relationship or not having the ability to work through things and being pretty rigid, yeah, that's a bad thing. However, like I said, it's very individualized that sometimes naming something toxic when it is toxic is really beneficial. So I'm curious to see how generations will continue to look at this, and maybe there'll be a rubber band effect and it'll kind of go back to the way it was previously. But yeah, more to come. We'll watch and see.
I've seen a lot of these videos, but none of them have really described what I think is actually going on. Some of us had parents that parentified us. We were their friends. We were their confidants. We were there for them.
I went no contact with my mama 3 times, and this is what happened. All right, so just to catch y'all up, me and my mama had a very adventurous relationship. I was on my side of the fence. She was on her side of the fence. We really couldn't find middle ground until like a few months before she died. So the idea of no contact was actually introduced to me by my therapist, because most of my therapy sessions were about navigating the relationship with my mama. And my therapist, who could relate to what I was going through, was like, hey, bro, you don't have to talk to your mama. So now I'm looking at her like, what you mean I don't have to talk to my mama? She's my mama. My way of thinking is aligned with most people in the world. You respect your mama, and that's that. But when she said that to me, it was like such an awakening, because her whole rationale was just like, hey, if the relationship isn't serving you, then why is your mama there? Like, why do you keep trying to have a relationship with somebody who doesn't seem to want to have a relationship with you? And let me be very clear about what she meant by not wanting to have a relationship with me. My mama didn't want to have a relationship with the person that I had become. I was still her son in her eyes, and that's a whole nother problem within itself, because she wasn't able to accept who I was. So she wasn't able to accept the pain that I was presenting to her and the pain that I was blaming on her. So yeah, I didn't go no contact just because I was angry. It was more so I needed separation and I needed clarity, because the whole time I'm going back and forth with her, The main thing on my end is I'm not able to accept the relationship for what it is. I have this ideal, vision of what a mother-son relationship looks like between she and I'm not getting it and I'm not understanding it. So I need understanding, but I'm too close to what's going on to understand anything. You feel me? My emotions were just all over the place at the time, and so were my mama's. But going no contact for that first month was amazing because the anger started to leave a little bit, and I'm able to like empathize with her more and be like, oh damn, yeah. Well, she did tell me she went through this, that, and the third, and I'm in a position now, in part because I'm going to therapy, to think like, okay, well, there's a ripple effect to everything. She's not this way because she woke up to be that way. She's this way because of shit that she went through and shit she didn't deal with. But after that month, I stepped right back into that fire, and I'm going to therapy, talking to my therapist about the same shit. So my therapist looked at me and said, Chico, like, you either on or you off. Like, what side of the fence are you on? You need to pick a side. Either she gonna be in your life or she not. Because this back and forth shit you doing ain't good for neither one of you. And I'm so mad again. I'm like, fuck it. Okay, cool. Like, I'm off. So we did a month again. And no contact was like ignoring phone calls. Only time I would hear anything about her is if my sisters was telling me stuff. And, mainly it was like, I wish your brother was back in my life, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, I don't want to hear it. But eventually I softened up again. I got a little more clarity, and I stepped right back into the fire. But this time, I'm kind of happy I did. Because this time, we saw some progress in our relationship. I had less anger. I had even more empathy. I had even more understanding because I had taken a step back to see things objectively. And now the third time I went no contact. At this point, we've been no contact for almost 4 years because July 8th, 2021, my mama died. And I'll probably make another TikTok about this at some other time, but her death was the best thing that could ever happen to our relationship. Because at this point, there's literally nothing that she can do that can like get me back in a loop of anger and shit like that. So at this point, like, I've been able to be proud of my mama, because even though she wasn't able to pour into me at her funeral, there were so many people from so many different walks of life that spoke so highly of her. So even though I didn't get to benefit from it as much as I would have liked, I know that she was able to pour into so many other people, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for all the arguments that we had. I'm grateful for me like standing where I stood at the time and letting her know. I have absolutely no regrets going no contact those 2 times. It prepared me for her death, I believe, because like her death was like the ultimate zoom out for me. Now I see everything for what it is, based off all the information I have about it. And it's just a good place to be. There's no sadness. I don't feel like I lost anything with her physically dying. I feel like I gained everything I ever wanted. No contact's gonna look however you want it to look, but go in with objectives. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't go no contact and just, oh, whatever happens, happens. Nah, like, get something out of it, because you can get a whole lot out of it. So I encourage anybody, if you're thinking about doing it, just to do it for yourself, not out of spite towards whoever you're doing it with. Do it for you.
Wow. Now, that was something very, very interesting to watch. I would like to encourage you to keep an open mind. A few disclaimers before we go on. I do not support neglection of parents, neither do I support excommunicating your own family unless there are reasons that go beyond reasonable doubt. But before we dive in, let's define who Gen Z and millennials are. For starters, Gen Z, who are also known as Zoomers, refer to people born between the year 1997 and 2012. So if you're in between that spectrum, just know that you are called Gen Z. You qualify to be a Gen Z. So they're growing up in a world of smartphones, of social media, and instant access to information. And I wonder if there is a relationship between that and them not speaking to their parents, because people in the olden days obviously had somewhere where they could meet and have not really social gatherings, but where they could meet and gather up as a family. So, where a TV was, not everyone had access to a TV, or rather, it was not as portable as a phone is. So, you would be forced to sit down together and interact as a family, as compared to now, where we have our individual gadgets. I must say I'm a Gen Z myself. So yeah, Gen Zs grow up in a world of smartphones, social media, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and virtual friendships are now being a priority as compared to relationships in our families. And if we talk about millennials, on the other hand, these are people born between the year 1981 and 1996. So they're often characterized as tech savvy and open minded. Now, let's explore why these generations might not be talking to their parents like they used to. Now, one reason for the disconnect is the difference in values and beliefs between generations. Now, I'll give you a very simple example. A survey that was done by the Pew Research Center found that 70% of millennials believe that society should prioritize protecting the environment compared to 56% of baby boomers. Now, this difference in values can lead to disagreements and misunderstandings. So, let's say a Gen Z individual is passionate about climate change and wants to reduce their carbon footprint, but their parents think it's just a phase. This can lead to frustrations and feelings of disconnection. Or, for instance, if a Gen Z individual is into things like fashion and makeup, and they see that as a source of income, um, a parent born before that time will obviously not understand how those two go hand in hand. Another example I'll give is content creation. So most people think YouTubers or digital content creators just do it for fun. And the older generation is not really willing to have a conversation and see what a situation is for what it is. So, as said before, things like this can lead to frustration and feelings of disconnection. Another reason is the changing dynamics within families. Now, I love to give facts here. According to the US Census Bureau in 2020, 33% of children lived with one parent, while 4% lived with neither parent. Now, this can lead to conflicts and feelings of disconnection. So, for instance, a child might feel like they are caught up in the middle of their divorced parents' conflicts, or a single parent might feel overwhelmed by the responsibility of raising kids alone. So, let's say a millennial is struggling to connect with their step parent who they feel is trying to replace their biological parent. Now, why I love this point is that it goes beyond the definition of a parent or as being biological. In addition to that, mental health and stress are also significant factors. Now, according to the National Institute of Mental Health in 2020, 19.4% of adults experienced an anxiety disorder. Gen Z and millennials are facing unprecedented levels of anxiety, of stress, and depression. Sometimes this can make it difficult for them to communicate effectively with their parents. For example, a Gen Z individual might be struggling with anxiety and feel like their parents don't understand what they're going through. And this is very common in Africa. Not that African parents are not understanding, it's just that there is this information gap between the older and the younger. So when you talk about things like depression and anxiety, to some extent it's translated to laziness. Yes, there's a mistranslation there. Generational trauma and differences can also play a role. So, parents may have experienced traumatic events or stressors that shaped their worldview. Meanwhile, Gen Z and millennials are facing their own unique challenges. And these differences can create tension and make communication more challenging. So, for instance, a millennial might be struggling to understand their parents' experiences during a war or economic hardship because they were not there. And let's say a parent who lived through a war is more frugal with resources, while their Gen Z child is more carefree with spending. Finally, there's a huge lack of emotional intelligence, and this can contribute to the disconnect. So, both parents and children may struggle to understand and manage their emotions, leading to conflicts and misunderstandings. Emotional intelligence is key to building strong, healthy relationships. So, for example, a parent may not recognize their child's emotional needs, and this leads to feelings of neglection and frustration. So, to sum it up, all I'm saying is the disconnect between Gen Z, millennials, and their parents is very complex and it is multifaceted if you were to move from culture to culture. So, for instance, what's accepted in an African home would never be respected in a Western home, and vice versa, or what's considered upright in the upper north would not be considered upright in the lower south because of things to do with culture, belief, ethnicity. So there tends to be a conflict, especially since the times that we're living in, we have people that are psychographics. The term demographics has easily changed to psychographics. So, by understanding the reasons behind this disconnect, we can start to bridge the gap and improve our relationships. So, I hope from watching this video, you're able to keep yourself in check and to understand which side of the spectrum you are on. So, thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you in the next video. If you've got any thoughts and suggestions or questions for future videos, please feel free to share them. I am dying to hear from you in the comments below. And also, don't forget to like, don't forget to comment, and hit that subscribe button. From me, it's goodbye, and I'll see you on the other side.